the new partner of Powur's, which I'm really excited about. So Scott, please take it away, brother.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Anthony. Scott Silvia, many of you may recognize me from either masterclass event earlier this month or Monday forum, or we've done a couple office hours at this point in time. So let me, there we go. Can you guys see this? You guys see the
yeah, we can see it.
Cool. Just wanted to make sure. Awesome. So again, Scott Silvia, my information is here down at the bottom, email and phone. Definitely use me as a resource. Some of this is going to be review from the masterclass, or if you've been on some of the office hours or the Monday forum, but I'm going to go through it and just reinforce as much of it as possible. Some of it's not going to be review. Like I'm going to do a live demo of the Span home app in demo mode as a sales companion. So be able to show you guys how to leverage that tool when pitching homeowners. It's really a super powerful tool. So we'll get into that in a minute. Regardless, here's the agenda. 3 very simple things I want to answer for you today. What is Span? Why is it valuable? How do I sell Span? Simple but powerful, right? If you have been on one of my trainings already, then don't do this because I already have your information. But if you haven't, then scan that QR code and answer the 2 or 3 questions at the end of it, at the other end of the QR code, so we can get you in the system and you can continue to get information. Like, you know, Anthony just mentioned, you guys have Justin from Franklin coming on. We just announced an official integration with Franklin yesterday that's going to be going to market first or second week of August. And there's some very compelling stuff about the integration with us and Franklin, namely because of their startup amperage. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we want to make sure everybody has that information for when we are live in the next couple of weeks. And there will be some information like that going out. So definitely scan this QR code and go through the couple questions on the other end of it. Awesome. So to start here, I always like to get the lay of the land, right? We're all going through challenges in the market. We're sort of in this inflection period in the industry that we seemingly go through every, 18 months to 2 years, something major happens, right? I think most of the team, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, is based in California, and maybe not selling just in California, but a lot of the team is California based and selling in California.
Yeah, majority is California.
Okay.
Second largest group is Texas. Third is Florida. And then from there, it's just kind of sprinkled out in the other states.
Great. So, regardless of where we're at, interest rates have gone up. Solar is getting more expensive. Generally, inflation and people have less buying power right now, right? There's just a lot of headwinds. Net metering, especially in California, we've moved into NEM3. Battery systems are going to be required really on every new project. Whether it's a grid-tied battery system or a full backup battery system to provide that evening arbitrage, because nobody's going to be getting the export rate that they used to get. And batteries introduce complexity, right? We all know that. It's a lot harder to sell when you got to throw a battery in the mix, especially from an ROI perspective, right? Everybody's dealing with that. A lot of people are having challenges with that. And net metering, all this stuff, it started in Hawaii. Now it's in California. It's definitely going to trickle out to the entire country in the coming years, right? That's just how it always has gone with the solar industry. Net metering is not a problem that stops in California, right? It's going to be a problem everywhere. So it's best to get ahead of it and start to coach and learn how to sell through it, right? And differentiate your offer. This is a great book that I've read a few times. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. It's how to turn adversity into advantage. This situation we're in right now is creating a lot of adversity, right? The folks that get ahead of it and really go right through the challenge or the obstacle and learn how to differentiate in this new market are going to not only survive, but thrive, right? It's sort of the challenger sale mentality that no matter what the market is, in fact, when the market's bad, there's actually more opportunity to differentiate. Awesome. What does that mean for Span, right? Well, Span provides this differentiating opportunity, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But this is the core product suite that makes up the Span home experience. Obviously, we've got the panel, the smart panel, which is the flagship product. That's sort of a reinvention of 100-year-old technology. The standard electrical panel hasn't really changed much in about 100 years, right? Some minor tweaks here and there, but we've made it intelligent and made it much prettier than your standard gray box. Additionally, the Span Drive electric vehicle charger, it's an intelligent electric vehicle charger that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the presentation. And then to tie everything together as an experience, the Span Home mobile app, right? In a minute here, I'm going to demonstrate this app in demo mode, which you all can utilize virtually or in person to demonstrate to a homeowner. And I'm going to get you comfortable with that today. But this is what the homeowner is interacting with on a day-to-day basis, monitoring circuit by circuit consumption data, turning circuits on and off manually from anywhere in the world if they need to, the best battery backup experience. We're going to cover all of that in the demo right now, but it's effectively a much better experience. It's an energy savings and battery backup dashboard for your home, right? We all have great dashboards in our car these days that tell us literally everything about the car at a moment's notice. Most of us don't have that in our home. That's what the Span Home app provides homeowners. So these two QR codes allow you to download the Span Home app. It's a free download. It's in both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store if you have an Android. Scan either of those QR codes or just pop into your App Store and type Span Home app and download the app. Because right now, in a minute here, after I let people scan this, I'm going to jump into the demo app myself virtually by way of this Zoom call. So showing you that you can also demonstrate this virtually to homeowners, right? So I'll give everybody about 10 more seconds here. And then I'm going to share this. Okay. Cool. Can everybody see this? This cell phone looking deal? Great. So when you open up the Span Home app, this is what you see. If you have a panel, you're obviously going to log in and be interacting with your actual panel. If you don't, and you're just curious or you're a salesperson, you can explore a Span simulated home. Click that button, then click this Watts residence, right? Move that banner up so it gets out of the way. And this is what you're going to see when you open up this demo experience, which is a 1-for-1 for what you would experience if you had a Span panel. This is all pretty normal, right? We've got solar production, we've got whatever's happening with the grid, whatever's going on with the battery and battery state of charge, which direction power is flowing through the panel, and then your whole home consumption data, right? This demo has like 3 or 4 different scenes. So every few seconds, it'll switch over to a new scene just for demonstration purposes. Like in a second here, it's gonna flip over and show more consumption in the home, right? And something else going on up here. All pretty normal stuff. All the other apps do this. What the other apps don't do is this. This is a circuit by circuit consumption data apparatus effectively that shows you exactly which appliances or circuits or outlets, anything that's landed in the panel, circuit by circuit. The scene just switched here. How much energy it's using in real time and what percentage of the overall energy it's using in real time, right? And so you can click into any one of these circuits and you're going to get a deep dive into that particular appliance or that particular circuit. In this case, I'm going to go to a more compelling, let's just go to the refrigerator isn't that compelling. We'll go to the dishwasher. So this shows you daily, weekly, monthly, yearly time horizon, right? Shows you how much energy you're using in that period of time, which is hugely critical if you're in a time of use area, right? From like 4 to 9 p.m., your rate jumps way up. Maybe you got your pool pump going from like 4 to 9 p.m. and you just really didn't know it because you're not really paying attention. It's just on. And you see, wow, my pool pump is going from 4 to 9 p.m. every day. And that's going to cost me a lot of money. Well, you'll be able to see that, right? You'll be able to see exactly which appliances are costing you money. And in the future, we're actually going to suggest that maybe you change behavior for certain circuits via push notifications because there are better times of the day to be running things, right? Based on your rate plan. So right now it's just the data. And in the future, as the software gets smarter, we're going to tell you when maybe to make changes to your consumption behavior. That's all well and good, right? You have the ability to turn circuits on and off remotely if you need to, on grid or off grid. with this toggle button here. So, you know, if you leave the curling iron on, you need to turn those circuits off. You can turn that off very easily. So these are the top 5 circuits in use that are on the home screen. If you come down here and you click into the circuits menu, you can see everything in the house by activity, by area, and how they're physically landed in the panel. So this is all at the homeowner's tip of their fingers, right? They get all of this information. All of these circuits look the same effectively. There's a time horizon and a toggle up here. That is one pillar of what's amazing about this app or this experience, is that we have circuit by circuit consumption data, much more powerful experience than an aggregate consumption, right? Because with aggregate, you may know what the culprits are that are creating an issue on your utility bill, even if you have solar. But with span, you really do know, right? You know exactly what's going on, what circuits are causing the most issue, and what, and because of that, knowledge is power, right? You're able to make more, you're able to make better decisions about how you're consuming energy in the home with something that's providing this much more data. Okay, switching gears here to the backup experience with Span. If you have all of the systems you guys are able to sell are compatible with Span, including Franklin, which I mentioned will launch in the next couple of weeks here. So I'm going to initiate an outage. What I did here is I came down to the settings menu, and it was red before, but it said initiate an outage. So I initiated a fake outage. Homeowner gets pinged. They get a push notification, a text, an email, anything. We're blowing them up, right? You have a power outage right now. You have 4 hours and 51 minutes of backup. Would you like to extend your backup by prioritizing circuits? Yeah, I absolutely would. So this is our backup experience. We virtualize the critical loads environment. All loads in the home are landed in Span at this point in time, right? So you have the ability in real time to decide what you want to have backed up. You're no longer deciding up front, like, oh, I don't really know. Maybe it's this circuit, this, like the traditional partial home backup situation, right? Where you're doing a critical loads panel with maybe 6 to 8 circuits, and the homeowner kind of waffles on what they want to have backed up. They don't really know, right? With this, you don't have to have that conversation. Every circuit has the ability to be backed up in real time. There's 3 buckets: must have, nice to have, and non-essential. Non-essential is self-explanatory. The minute the grid goes out, these are shed. Nice to have remain on as long as the battery state of charge is above 50%. So the minute it goes to 49%, then all of these are shed. Must have basically stay on as long as you have battery state of charge. What we also provide, because we have that circuit by circuit consumption profile, is a to the minute amount of time that you have in the current state, right? It's much better than a percentage. A percentage is arbitrary. When you get pinged on your cell phone and it's down at 20%, how much longer do you have before the battery dies? Well, it depends, right? Are you FaceTiming or are you sending emails and texting? Because if you're FaceTiming, it might be 30 minutes. But if you're just texting, it's going to be 3 or 4 hours probably, right? So in this current state, this homeowner, this fake homeowner, has 4 hours and 51 minutes. If they're like, oh, I don't really need the garage lights, let me kick those over. Well, you just extended your backup by an hour and some change, right? So you have this ability in real time. Not only can you set and forget where you want things to normally be, but you can change stuff in real time from anywhere in the world, right? Your panel's connected to the internet, your phone's connected to the internet or cellular, and you're able to interact with this panel from anywhere in the world, right? And decide what you want to have backed up in real time. If you have a battery system that cannot power on a certain load, like an N-phase system, maybe one battery, and it can't power on the HVAC load, you can lock that load out when you commission the panel by checking a box, and basically it'll show up here grayed out and not, you can't turn it on, right? These ones you can turn on. As you can see, they're not grayed out and they can go left. So you can go any direction with these loads. If you have a Franklin battery and it has a startup amperage, in many cases, that's why it's a valuable battery in the market right now, that can power on a lot of HVAC systems with one battery. You can have that HVAC system in this nice to have, power it on, The minute your state of charge dips below 50%, then it'll shed the air conditioning, right? So there's all this great automation in place to give the homeowner ultimate peace of mind and flexibility as well, right? So pretty compelling stuff. It's definitely the best battery backup experience on the market, bar none, right? And effectively, if you're in a situation where somebody wants their system to work in an outage, then there's no reason why you shouldn't at least show them this technology and let them select, right? Do you want this or do you not want it? Because if they want it, they're probably going to be willing to pay for it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I forgot to mention, if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand. We'll get them, you know, it's a small enough group here that we can get them answered right on the spot. Does anyone have any questions about what's been covered so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. So thanks, Scott, for being here and doing this for us. I just was wondering, like typically, when you're trying to build this out and you're looking at, you know, a single battery option in the past, you couldn't really do 40 and 50 amp circuits. It looks like you have air conditioning on your list, but it looks like this takes away limitations on 40 and 50 amp circuits like air conditioning or electric vehicles. And then if you did get AC, would you still have to get like an AC soft start or a panel upgrade? Probably not, right?
So we are not solving for the startup amperage of the battery. That's why I mentioned Franklin a minute ago with the HVAC system, because they have a much higher startup amperage than Tesla or Enphase or SolarEdge. So in many cases with one Franklin battery, you can power on a lot of HVAC systems. We're not solving for the ability to power on those loads with the battery system. If you can't power on the HVAC system because the battery won't supply enough power to do it, again, we're not solving for that. You can lock that load out here and make sure the homeowner never is able to turn it on to create a cycle event or a brownout on the battery. But when you're on grid, you'll still get all the great consumption data for that circuit, right? So you get the best of both worlds. It's a little bit better than, you know, traditionally leaving it out of the critical loads panel and bucketing it in with aggregate consumption, right? You still get the circuit by circuit consumption, and you still will have to lock that load out if the battery system can't supply enough amperage to power it on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, this is very impressive what you have here. I was on the call that you did earlier in the week, the Rachel McDonald call for the mentors, and what you were, the Franklin presented that day too, and they were saying that you're like kind of the branded partner of Franklin.
Yeah.
And so maybe it works better with Franklin, but is there a reason why there would be any disadvantages using Enphase or SolarEdge in that, or is there a reason? Is it just branding with Franklin, or is there a reason why that was the kind of the go-to in that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, you can go with any battery system. The reason I bring up Franklin is because you can get a whole home experience with one battery. What would traditionally take two or more batteries, with Franklin and Span, because of this experience right here, you get a whole home like experience, right? Well, and so because of that, one Span plus one Franklin battery is going to cost less than two or more batteries without Span, right? So it drives down the overall cost of the job and still provides a whole home like experience. That is true, most true with Franklin because of their startup amperage and the ability to turn on most HVAC systems. It's not as true with Enphase or SolarEdge or even Tesla, because the startup amperages are lower on their batteries, and one battery in their highest, you know, kilowattage battery in many cases is not able to power on a lot of HVAC systems. So it doesn't really matter what battery system you use. There's just that extra bit of startup amperage with Franklin that makes the combination of Span and Franklin a grand slam. I hope that makes sense.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. We got a hand raised.
Yeah. Hey, Scott. Yeah, thank you for being here. I do have a question in regard to the statement that you just made, as well as I want to piggyback off of Brad's question. So in the training and knowledge base, because of the functionality of this app, it says that, you know, you can save or have 40% more battery life because of the configuration and capability of this.
Yeah.
So for the guys that are in California, we're just dealing with this new NIM situation,
Yeah,
and our concern is that we really, really, really don't know until next year how many batteries a customer really needs.
yeah.
So with this span product, is it safe to say that a client or customer can go with fewer batteries instead of doing, let's say, 2 or 3 batteries? Just do one battery and utilize the functionality of the Span app to expand the life of that battery. Am I making sense in what I'm asking you?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So great question, Dana. Multifold question here. So everything I'm showing you right now is when there's an outage, right? So this is not on-grid arbitrage. But if you're arbitraging down to your reserve every evening at 30% or what have you, you're going to be able to stretch that 30% out considerably longer with Span if there is an outage in the evening. So that's what we mean by 40% longer in an outage, right? Because this middle group, this nice to have, the minute the battery state of charge dips below 50%, those loads are automatically shed. We ran a simulation that showed, 1,200 homes that with the battery system that we ran the simulation with. Without Span, the backup time was 20 hours on average, and with Span, it was 28 hours on average. And because of this flexibility, you're able to stretch that time out considerably longer. And you're able just to see what the time is, right? It's not an arbitrary percentage, but you see the time. Now, as far as ROI and arbitrage and how many batteries are needed to get the best ROI, I agree with you. Like everybody's kind of shooting in the dark right now with that, right? Is it a 2-to-1 ratio? Is it a 1-to-1 ratio? Is it a 1.5-to-1 ratio? Nobody really knows right now. The great thing about Span is because it's a circuit by circuit consumption apparatus, right? You get to see that data a lot clearer than an aggregate experience. Somebody that has Span is going to be far more informed about their consumption profile than somebody that doesn't. So if they add one battery today and 6 months down the line, they see that one battery might not be enough to get their true up or the ROI that they thought they were going to get, then they can add another battery, right? I mean, that's kind of true with or without Span, obviously, but somebody with Span is going to be far more informed. Now, I can't make the claim that we're going to help battery systems perform better in this ROI-driven NEM3 world on grid, right? Because we're not doing on-grid scheduling at this point in time, except for the EV charger, which you can do. Other loads are tricky, right? When you're on grid and you want to schedule your heat pump to turn off, your hot water heater to turn off, or the dryer to turn off from 4 to 9 p.m. Well, what if other members of your household want to use those appliances, right? It gets very invasive and tricky. So we're looking into ways to help with time of use sort of scheduling on grid. But today, the best we're providing, and it is better than an aggregate experience, is the ability to see that circuit by circuit consumption and that like pool pump example that I gave earlier, right? So we will offer suggestions for savings and may even nudge homeowners in the future to be like, hey, you should turn this circuit off right now if you're not using it because it's expensive. That will all come in time. But for now, it's just the data that the homeowners have access to, which is more data than the aggregate experience.
I
Makes
think
sense.
that's a great idea, Dana, because honestly, we're just shooting in the dark. We don't know what to do. And so with this product, we can really get clarity and be able to size it to this specific person's needs later on. I guess the
Yeah.
only challenge is Powur doesn't allow us to sell battery only deals. And so if you got the solar plus, let's say, a single battery with this, we really can't add more batteries later on. That's the only disadvantage of having that strategy. But I think it's smart to do it that way. Is there any workaround that Powur will allow if someone already has an existing battery to add? They're not going to do it, right? And they're not going to allow us to add additional battery, right?
Hey, Brad, they said that they are going to allow it coming up. They don't allow
Right.
it now, but they will allow it soon.
Yeah, I'd say within a year, probably even less, there will have retrofit battery installations.
That there's a huge opportunity when I went out knocking doors talking to people, that was by far the people that were most interested. People that had solar didn't have batteries. There's a huge market for that. And I mean, when I was at Semper for 4 years, like half the deals I sold with batteries that were retrofits on existing solar systems. I mean, that's big. I hear you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys for your input. These are all the important questions, right? So that was the demo. It's that quick. That's really all you need to show. You got to know a little bit of context, download the app, get familiar with it, know the little bit of context, but it pretty much tells the story itself, right? So show it, it's a soft sale. Show the technology, differentiate your sales experience, because you guys are at the tip of the spear, right? There's not going to be many other salespeople out there providing this experience. Everybody's in the commodified sort of price-driven race to the bottom. This is a whole different conversation, right? Cool. So moving along here, that's all good and well, but what does this do for you guys, right, on a day-to-day? It simplifies and maximizes your battery backup sales offering. No more critical loads conversation. If you go through the demo I just went through, it's very compelling, right? Makes it easier to talk about electrical changes. We're going to speak to this specifically in a minute here, but you can avoid main panel upgrades in many scenarios in meter main combo markets like California, Arizona, parts of Texas, parts of Florida. And then in markets where the meter is standalone, span can become the new main panel if a main panel upgrade is needed. We'll talk specifically about this in a minute. Differentiate your approach in a competitive landscape. That's self-explanatory, right? This using span as an experiential anchor product or anchor experience is different, right? It's going to be a different conversation with that homeowner. It'll help you generate more money per project, higher ticket size, and streamline your process. These 3 value props. What does it do for your customers? That's important as well. It's an energy savings dashboard for their home, and it's going to get even more compelling in that regard as we roll out future software updates and actually nudge homeowners to make compelling changes to how they're utilizing energy, right? Best battery backup experience in the market. We went through that. You saw why that's the case. And it future readies their home for electrification. We're going to talk specifically about this when we talk about the EV charger span drive, okay? Overall, it just delights your customers, and it's going to create more referrals. Time and time again, we hear people that have a span home with a span panel are out at parties with their friends and family or get-togethers, and they're showing their friends, families, and neighbors their span home app, right? And they're going to say, how'd you get that? Where'd you get that? And they're going to refer back to you guys, right? Because you provided that awesome experience. Great. So switching gears a bit here. These are the optimal use cases for span. I'm only going to focus really on the top 2 and the bottom 2, or the top 4, I'll say right here. Mainly the top 2, because we know, as I'm sure all of you guys know, main panel upgrades are a nightmare in California. I know they're also in many cases a nightmare in Texas, and less so in Florida, I know, but they're happening all over the place, and they really are a nightmare in California. Span is installed as a sub panel in all states where there are meter main combos, or all circumstances where there are meter main combos. We do not replace the meter main combo. And because of that, in many scenarios, you're able to leave that existing meter main combo, even if it's 100 amp, 125 amp, 150 amp, whatever it may be, where it is. You don't have to get a meter spot. You don't have to deal with the utility. You don't have to get a service feed upgrade if they want to add an EV charger. We'll talk specifically about that in a minute. But because span is a 225 amp bus bar, solar ready bus bar, and you're relocating the loads out of the existing panel fully into span, either right next to it or right behind it, or within 6 feet, whether it's next to it or right behind it, then you're able to get all of the solar backfeed that you need. You're not limited by solar backfeed anymore, and you don't have to get a main panel upgrade. It's a very compelling situation. My design team or my technical services team is working hand in hand with the Powur design team to quickly help you guys diagnose whether span can be utilized in this way. We know that it can be in a vast majority of situations, like 60 to 70 to 80% of the situations, depending on where you are in the state or the region where they have these meter main combos. Really, the only time it can't be used is if that existing panel cannot pass through the full service capacity to span as a sub panel. So if you're avoiding an MPU with span and you want backup, traditionally, if it was just one battery, you'd have to do the MPU and a critical loads panel. That's 2 new panels, and you're dealing with the utility. You're not getting to PTO for many months, right? With span, you're avoiding that long lead time, and you're installing one panel that becomes the main panel upgrade avoidance panel and the critical loads panel all in one box. So it's less labor. The labor is less, and that will be reflected on the line item within that certain circumstance when you're proposing that project. The same is true for whole home backup or traditional whole home backup, right? If you were going to do a new meter main and then have to do a second panel with you know, to be the critical loads panel, span avoids the MPU and becomes the critical loads panel, whether it's partial home traditionally or whole home. The panel is the panel. It has all the loads. Whether you have 1 battery or 5 batteries, it doesn't really matter, right? It's all landed in span and you're avoiding the MPU. So it streamlines the entire process. This is huge in California, and it's being utilized quite a bit, right? You guys may be familiar with the Hawaiian tie-in. This is why we call this the span tie-in, right? And it's even more compelling when you add backup, because that panel maximizes, as we showed in the demo, the battery backup experience. Any questions on those two? I wanted to hit on those because I know MPUs suck in many of the areas you're selling. And I know that you guys, you know, there's going to be grid tied battery situations, but there's going to be a lot of situations where homeowners want to back up their home as well. So wanted to talk about that.
Okay, so for the first 2, I see it says specifically for California.
Yeah.
So is this going to help us with, you know, PG&E has recently changed their policies for meters that are within 3 feet of the gas main?
Yeah.
Is that going to help us with this as well?
Yeah.
Or help? Okay.
Yeah, because you don't have to touch that meter. The meter
Okay.
stays where it is. That's only if you're replacing the panel. And then if you're replacing it, you have to move it more than 3 feet away. But if you're not replacing it, you're leaving it where it is and you're passing it through, then all of this is NEC compliant per the sum of all breakers rule. It's like 705.1 or .21B33. So this is all above board, NEC compliant. It's been approved, this type of install throughout California in all the IOUs, including PG&E.
Gotcha. And can this be installed in the garage?
Yes.
Okay.
Outdoor or indoor. The panel's outdoor rated, and obviously you can install it indoors as well. Yeah. Okay, so the other 2 I want to talk about here, meter mains are outside of just California, right? It can be Arizona, parts of Nevada, parts of Texas, parts of California, parts of New Mexico, parts of Colorado. Anytime the meter is contained within the main panel in the same enclosure, you can do the span tie-in to avoid the MPU. If you're in a market where it's a meter only, standalone meter and the main panel separate, then span can become the main panel if you're doing an MPU. So not as compelling from like a utility avoidance situation, but still compelling in that you already have to replace that main panel. If they want to do backup, then span is a great option to maximize that scenario. The other 2 scenarios I want to talk about is if there's no MPU needed with a meter main combo. If you're doing whole home backup, you're going to have to move all of the loads out of that meter main combo anyway, right? You have to do full load relocation if you're doing whole home backup. Span can be that panel that you fully relocate to, and the labor would be the same. The only time where span is more labor is if you don't need to do an MPU and you're just doing, you know, 4 to 6 to 8 loads in a critical loads panel. With span, you're going to be relocating all the loads. So it's going to be more labor to relocate more than, you know, 6 to 8 loads. And we acknowledge that, you know, if the homeowner wants the technology, they'll pay for it, right? If they don't, then they don't, and that's fine. In that scenario, we are slightly more labor. In all of these other scenarios, we are either the same or less labor. Just want to call that out. Cool. All right, I kind of covered this, but this is how you get to use span as a span tie-in. As you can see in this grid, traditionally in the second row of this grid, you're only able to get that amount of solar backfeed, right? With span, because it's a 225 amp bus bar and you're relocating all of the home's loads into span, you're able to get that amount of solar backfeed on the final column on the respective services. So you'll see on 100 amp, 125 amp, you can get up to 100 amps of solar backfeed or 125 amps of solar backfeed, which is going to be way more than you're going to need on a service size of that size, right? This is all NEC compliant. It's been approved by HJs in several installs at this point in time. You can utilize this, and we're going to help you be able to diagnose when this is the case.
One more question, Scott. I just had
Sure.
sorry to keep bugging, but
No,
I just
that's okay.
I was curious about the idea of a situation where someone has underground wiring and there's got to be trenching with PG&E.
Yeah.
It's a known issue that they're going to have more capacity for a solar system. Would this be a potential workaround that would allow to be able to give you an option to have more capacity so that we don't have to do trenching and we can avoid those major issues?
Yeah, the
Discuss it.
capacity for a solar backfeed is actually based on the bus bar of the panel, not the feed coming into the house. So the feed coming into the house becomes an issue if you want to add like a EV charger, right? Then in many cases, which span also solves for, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's really based. So if you got a 100 amp home, you got a 100 amp panel, it has a 100 amp bus bar. That's why you're limited with solar backfeed, is because of the bus bar, not the feed coming into the house. So we solve for whether it's underground service, overhead service. You don't need to upgrade the service, and you don't need to upgrade the main service panel. Span is installed as a sub. The home's loads are relocated into span. And because span is a 225 amp bus bar, you're now no longer limited with the solar backfeed.
And that doesn't require like permission from the utility to do that, right?
No, this is a sub panel install. So you're completely avoiding utility interaction. You're not, the reason you're dealing with the utility is because you're fussing with the meter, right? You got to do a new main panel, you got to do a new meter, right? Or you got to do a new meter spot, and you got to have them come out in many cases and do a disconnect, reconnect, right? You're not having to do that in this scenario. You're shutting off the main breaker in the existing panel, relocating the loads to a sub panel, turning back on the main breaker in the main panel, and you're good to go. It's a sub panel install.
Great solution. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
hey,
go ahead.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay? I'm driving. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you, Alan.
Okay, I have a project that's probably 9 months old. We've been having to move the main panel because it's too close to the gas line.
Yeah.
And then trying I think a side load tab. We tried sideline tab. We tried a few things that didn't work. But now they're in the side load tab. So that's in the authority of jurisdiction or whatever, trying to get the approval. So if that doesn't go through, so if this was before span. So if we add span to that now, we would be able to get around that MPU. Is that what I'm hearing?
Is the existing main panel still where it is? Like you haven't pulled it out yet?
Done it. We can't get around it. They don't want to trying to move it away from the gas line.
As long as that panel can pass the full, is it 100 amp home?
I believe it might be 100 or might even be a 75. I think it's 100 though is what I'm thinking.
Okay. As long as that panel can pass the full 100 amp or a 75 amp, whatever it is, through to span, in many cases they can. In rare cases they can't. And we don't want to further pigeonhole their or bottleneck their service. So we always recommend, like, hey, if it can only pass, 70% of the power through to span, then we don't recommend using this. But that's a rarity. A lot of these panels can pass the full capacity of the service through.
And I believe it can, because the only problem we having is it's too close to the gas line. So, but it's 8-9 months. We on the 9th month. To get this thing pushed through, because we can't, trying to get around that movement of the MPU.
Yeah, so, the power design team is fully aware of this solution. So just bring it up. They'll know what to do.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. Okay, thank you, friend.
Absolutely. Cool. So I really want to talk about this slide. I think this is very powerful, because wherever you are in the country, outages are an issue, whether it's heat waves or fire or bad weather or storms. I think there are two buying profiles in the market, right? You've got your very ROI driven. I just want to save $20 on my electrical bill. I don't care if the system works when the power goes out. This is especially critical in California because we're going to be slapping batteries on the house no matter what, right? If you don't ask this question, you're not going to potentially find the buyer that is emotionally driven and wants resiliency, right? You may just think they're ROI driven because that's the default, and they may be willing to spend money for resiliency beyond just saving money on their electric bill, right? So I would ask this question of every single customer, because then you right away know what type of customer you're dealing with. You're dealing with somebody that values resiliency and they're willing to pay for it, right? Think about how many people have Ring cameras on their doorbell now, or full-blown security systems. Like, people value resiliency and peace of mind, right? They are willing to pay for it too. It's an emotional purchase. It's not necessarily an economic purchase. So if you don't ask this question, then you didn't shoot the shot. You don't know what type of customer you're dealing with, right? So ask the question. It's a simple question. Do you want the system to work when the power goes out? Because then you know you're not in this price-driven, ROI-only arena. Obviously, that type of customer still wants to be able to save money, but they're willing to pay for the backup system, right? And it's an easy upsell in California, right? You're already putting the battery on the house. Just ask, do you want this battery to work when the power goes out? And even in markets where the battery isn't always going on, you still should ask the question, because if you don't shoot the shot, you're never going to know. You know, the old adage, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And as you all know, a battery backup job is a higher average ticket, right? Every time. So ask the question and figure out who your customer is. Let them tell you who they are. Don't try and tell them who they are. We went through this. This is the 40% on average longer battery backup. This is effectively because we shed the nice to have loads at 50% automatically. And then you have that full flexibility to switch loads around however you want to. If you're arbitraging down to 30% in California and the power goes out at midnight, you're going to be able to stretch your power out until the sun comes back up the next day super easily. Cool. Span Drive. This is our EV charger. We are compatible with all EV chargers. This is the one we manufacture, and it's an accessory item to our panel, meaning that it can only be plugged into Span, right? It can't be used standalone. Because of that, it does one very cool thing. But I want to talk about what the Span panel provides as far as a service feed avoidance upgrade. Not a main panel upgrade, but a service feed upgrade. So in many cases, if you're just needing more solar backfeed, you don't need to do also more service feed coming into the house. You just need to upgrade the panel to a solar ready panel. But if you want to add EV charging, you're going to need to upgrade both. You're going to need to upgrade the feed and the panel. In the case we talked about earlier, where Span avoids a main panel upgrade, it also avoids a service feed upgrade when you're dealing with an EV charger load. Because we manage that load, in the case of our panel, we throttle the amperage down when other loads turn on so that the main breaker will never trip. Or in the case of other EV chargers, we pause it at its highest capacity. So it goes from, say, 48 amps or 40 amps to 0. And then we turn it back on automatically when it's safe to do so. Because we manage that load in such a way, it's thrown out of the load calcs. You don't need to put it in the load calculations, and then you don't need to do a service feed upgrade. What does that mean for you guys? If you're on a job site and you're already selling a renewable system, solar only, solar plus battery, you're already there. You're already making a bunch of money, right? And they're getting a nice new Span panel too. Ask them, you going to get an electric vehicle soon, or do you already have one? Are you happy with your charging experience? No, it actually charges kind of slow. Well, we can get you we can either utilize the existing EV charger that you have in Span, and you're going to get more capacity out of that, or we can sell you this EV charger, and actually I'll throw in the equipment for free because it's only going to cost you guys like $550, right? The installation will be less because you guys are already on site, and it's sort of a cherry on top to sweeten the deal potentially. And if they already have an EV or they're getting an EV soon, then they're going to be ready to rock at full 48 amp charge capacity for the most part, unless they got a bunch of other loads on in the home. So you've avoided the main panel upgrade because of this solar backfeed issue, and you've avoided the service feed upgrade because SPAN manages the EV charge load. So you're getting a twofer with SPAN when they want to add an EV charger. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, it does to me.
Cool. Use it. Use this. I hear there are a lot of sales, not a lot, a few out there that have become savvy to this, and they'll just throw in the EV charger for free to win the deal, right? It's a nominal amount of money compared to the overall cost of the job. Okay. I'm going to speed through this. This is sort of like a talk track, right? Imagine I'm you guys and you're the homeowner. Great news. We've designed an excellent renewable system for your house that's going to save you money, make you green, prepare you for the future. We're going to need to perform some electrical work, show them the SPAN panel, right? Short for smart panel, all of these things, circuit by circuit usage insight, turn any circuit on and off from your phone, best backup experience, future ready your house for EV charging. Basically, like, invest a bit more today, get it back in savings, and be ready for the future. You're going to have to do electrical changes at some point in time, right? That's the talk track. Screenshot this slide if you want to use it. It's pretty self-explanatory though. Cool. Live in Solo and Vision. Good to go. Pricing's in there. We're working on getting some redundancies pulled out of some of the other line items when you add battery, but you guys have a very competitive red line for SPAN. And it includes the MPU labor if you're avoiding the MPU, or the MPU labor if you're using SPAN as the main panel for a standalone meter. It also includes the labor for any critical loads panel and the material for the critical loads panel. So we're working on getting a few, like I said, redundancies out of the backup line items, but you guys have a very competitive red line as far as SPAN. This is the last slide I want to show, because this is the hook. This is why SPAN's compelling for you guys, right? We talked about the SPAN tie-in and avoiding the MPU today, right? This single use case. For about 50 cents more a day to the homeowner, whether it's a PPA, lease, loan, they can get SPAN. You can avoid dealing with the utility, right? You get to close the job out faster. You get a customer that's probably going to create a referral somewhere down the line, or many referrals, and you get paid quicker, right? You avoid utility backlog, faster installs, compelling user experience, differentiate your sales experience, and the homeowner gets all of those key values as well. And that's for 50 cents a day, right? Like $15 a month more. Ask the question, do you want this system to work when the power goes out? If they do, they're going to be more than willing to pay this amount of money, right? Even some that aren't, they're on the fence about it, right? They may be willing to pay this amount of money, and you just upsold them, right? So take this how you will. That's effectively the training. I know we're a couple minutes over. Does anybody have any final questions?
Does
Do you
Powur
have additional,
right now?
additional trainings? Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Well, I was
Dana.
just gonna ask if Powur has a standalone SPAN product right now. Can we sell this to existing customers? No.
I don't think so. I think it's only either solar only or solar plus battery. And then in the future, I think battery retrofit with an existing solar, you'll be able to sell SPAN on that as well. But whenever that's live for you guys.
I got a
My
quick
question
question.
was just gonna. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. On the pricing on that, does it go by the kilowatts, or is it just the basic set price?
It's a set price based on where you're at. It's a few things. It's geolocation based, and it's also it's dependent upon the situation too. But it's a flat rate.
Can you give us that number, or do we have to look it up in?
I don't. It's different everywhere. So if I don't want to give you a number that's wrong. I know that it floats. It floats between like 5,300 and 5,700, depending where you're at. But if your MPU is 3,500 or 4,200 or 4,500 if you're doing a feed upgrade too, then the differential is nominal, and you don't have to deal with the utility if you're avoiding the MPU.
Excellent presentation, by the way.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, a quick question. Appreciate the call. It's very, very informative. How many systems like this y'all have installed to date?
We're a private company, so I can't disclose exactly how many installs we've done, but we've installed, Span has been installed in 48 states. We've been around for 5 years. We have thousands of installation partners throughout the country. So use your imagination, but we're doing pretty well at this point in time and expanding quite rapidly as far as installations.
All right, that's good. What happens if a panel goes down?
So this is an electrical panel. The software is completely separate. If the internet goes out or this, software stops working, the power will continue to pass through to the home. We don't plan on going under. If we, at the very worst, somebody would purchase us, right? And then they would take over the service. They would take over the software. Like this stuff's not going to go anywhere, right? It's not just going to dead end and die. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
We're very well funded, and there's going to be, either an IPO or an acquisition at some point in time.
Okay. Figured there would be. Thanks for that, Scott. The other question I have is on install times. What's the fluidity in the process on that, since it's a different panel going in? Can any electrician put one in?
We have an authorization program. It's very easy to get authorized. I've already connected with the Powur ops team to make sure that everybody, anytime a Span panel is sold, they may already be an authorized Span installer because we have a massive network of our own. But if they're not, then we quickly fast track them to get authorized. So you're not going to ever run into issues where the installer is not authorized to install the panel. Don't worry about that. We've got all that covered. If you're talking in relation to a main panel upgrade, whether you're avoiding the main panel upgrade or using Span as a new main panel, the installation time on site is exactly the same. It's
perfect.
6 to 8 hours, maybe 10 hours in certain circumstances, but very similar to a main panel upgrade as far as on-site labor.
All right, excellent. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So if you want more on this or you joined late, we're doing office hours every Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's in the Powur calendar. Here's my information again. Shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Get a hold of me. I'm a resource. I want to help you guys bridge the gap and sell Span. So thanks again for the time. I really appreciate it. I look forward to meeting some of you guys at Powur World. I'll be there. So thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. And I will say this, because I emailed a bunch of our new vendors and stuff, and Scott was actually the first one to respond. So he's kind of on it. So yeah, I can confirm. If you email him, he will respond fairly quickly. So awesome.